In the tapestry of English history, most of us can trace its outline clearly. The Tudors, the Elizabethan Age, and the Industrial Revolution, all neatly stitched into the fabric of a well-told past. But the deeper you look, the more the forgotten threads begin to show. And among those is a story that speaks of human resilience, government betrayal, and ordinary people standing up against extraordinary odds, a tale lost in the margins of history. It all began in the 18th century, a period we often associate with colorful aristocrats, powdered wigs, and sprawling Georgian estates. But beneath the image of elegance and empire was a growing crisis. England's cities were swelling, fueled by the early rumblings of industrialization. With this rapid growth came crushing poverty, and many found themselves living on the edge of survival, dangerously close to ruin. This was the backdrop for the plight of the forgotten rebels of Tolpuddle. In the quiet rural county of Dorset, far from the sophistication of London, lay the unassuming village of Tolpuddle. Nestled in rolling fields and hedgerows, this idyllic setting masked a darker reality faced by its people: exploitation and despair. For generations, the farmers in Tolpuddle had eked out a living from the land, but by the 1830s, their world was crumbling. Agricultural workers, known as laborers, had been the backbone of England's countryside for centuries. But as machinery and market forces began to reshape farming, landlords and landowners sought to cut costs. The weight of change fell squarely on the workers' shoulders. Wages, once meager but livable, plummeted to starvation levels. The laborers toiled from sunrise to sunset, only to find themselves unable to buy enough bread to feed their families. In Tolpuddle, 6 farm laborers decided enough was enough. They were not prominent politicians or nobles. They were ordinary men, desperate to change their fate. George Lovelace, a Methodist preacher and the group's de facto leader, believed they had a right to fair pay. Armed with their faith and determination, the men began to organize. They formed a workers' union, swearing an oath of secrecy to protect each other. It was not an act of defiance, but of necessity. But in 1834, England's political climate had no tolerance for even a whisper of rebellion. The government, terrified by memories of the French Revolution and the growing stirrings of public unrest, viewed all forms of labor organization as dangerous, even treasonous. Workers' unions, though not strictly illegal, were treated with suspicion and hostility. The Tolpuddle men's simple oath of solidarity painted a target on their backs. And so, one early spring morning, the 6 men of Tolpuddle were arrested. The charge? Administering unlawful oaths, a vague accusation rooted in laws meant for mutinous sailors and conspirators, not impoverished farmers. The trial that followed was a mockery of justice. The landowners and politicians involved spun tales of insurrection and sedition, accusing the men of plotting to overthrow society itself. In the court's eyes, their true crime was clear: the audacity to stand up against those in power. The verdict was swift: guilty. The punishment: transportation. For the uninitiated, transportation was a sentence worse than prison. It meant exile to the other side of the world, to the Australian penal colonies. A cruel fate that tore families apart forever. The 6 men of Tolpuddle, including George Lovelace, were condemned to harsh labor thousands of miles from home for daring to demand a fair wage. But though the government wanted to make an example of them, they could not have foreseen what came next. Word of the trial spread like wildfire, and an unlikely wave of solidarity swelled. Ordinary people, workers from across the country, took up the cause of the Tolpuddle Martyrs, as they came to be called. Protests erupted in cities like London and Manchester. Over 800,000 signatures, unheard of at the time, were collected demanding their release. It was one of the first mass workers' movements in British history. The government tried to ignore the outcry, but the people's voices grew louder. After years of relentless activism, the relentless pressure paid off. In 1836, the Tolpuddle Martyrs were pardoned. One by one, they returned home, but their exile had come at a cost. Their lands, jobs, and communities had been stripped from them. It was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. The story of the Tolpuddle Martyrs faded with time, buried beneath the larger, louder stories of Britain's industrial might and imperial expansion. And yet their quiet act of defiance planted seeds for change. It inspired early trade unions to press forward, undeterred by laws or threats. Those 6 men demonstrated that even in the face of overwhelming oppression, unity and courage could move mountains. Today, in the village of Tolpuddle, there stands a museum dedicated to their memory. Each year, workers and activists gather to honor their legacy, a reminder of a fight that is both long past and ongoing. The wages we earn, the rights we hold, and the idea that workers deserve dignity and respect owe something to those weathered hands that once tilled Dorset soil and clenched in solidarity. The next time we think of England's history, let us not forget Tolpuddle. It's a story not of kings or queens, but of ordinary people making history through extraordinary courage. Because sometimes the smallest villages echo the loudest through time.